Hello, and welcome to the Amongst Romans podcast, your window to everything Italy from an outsider's perspective. Join us each week as we navigate the Italian way of life and all the adventures that come along with it. Alex, welcome back. Happy to have you back in Italy. How was your trip to Canada?
It was eventful, that's for sure. Just getting over some jet lag at the moment, but otherwise it was good.
Did you miss Italy? How does it feel coming back after being away for so long? Like, how does it feel in Toronto, and how does it feel coming back?
Well, Toronto feels a little different, right? It doesn't feel like home as much anymore. So yeah, it's got a different vibe, a different feel. So it's good to be back.
Now, did you miss Italy when you were there?
Yeah, of course. Definitely just miss the general vibe of Italy and kind of, especially the food, right? So it was some getting used to to eating fast food kind of things and not being able to really cook, or I didn't have much of a chance to cook. So, was really eating out a lot more than I should. And yeah, it wasn't the greatest.
Well, I'm glad you're back, and I did some episodes without you. But I left this one because I know you want to talk about Palermo. So here we are.
Yeah, it's one of the places that I really enjoyed that we visited some little while ago. So, I think we should probably cover our experience when we first flew in.
Yeah, that was crazy, wasn't it? So to give you some context, we got there quite late because we were flying in from, I believe we flew in from Greece and we got there late. So at that time, I don't think there were any buses or anything else running at the time. So we had to try to get a cab, and that was very chaotic.
Yeah, that was an interesting experience because for some reason we would not be, we weren't able to get a hold of one. There would be a lineup of people and everybody be rushing to get to the cab and jump on, but the pricing was all out of whack too. So I think they were kind of taking advantage of the fact that we're flying in late. So it was a late evening. Actually, it's close around to midnight or so. So I think that was taken advantage of, which was interesting. And our flagging that one driver was also quite an experience.
Yeah, and I don't even think it was like an actual cab. It was more like a van because it was us and like I think maybe two other couples. They just like took people and they did charge you the price was I forget like $10 per person or something like that, or more than that. Anyway, it was like crazy. So you had no choice. Either you go with this guy in this van with a bunch of other people, or you wait and who knows how long you would have waited. So yeah, that was very chaotic, and I can't believe we actually got a van, but we did because again it was late and we had no options. But that was our introduction to Palermo.
Yeah, that was that was quite interesting. Yeah, the fact that we had to kind of wheel and deal with some of those cab drivers and ending up finding that one gent with his little plunging neckline, his funky shirt and his slick back hair. Managed to get a better deal for us and some other tourists. I think they were from France, and one of them kind of spoke a bit of Italian, so she had some Italian background, and yeah, that was that was quite an experience.
Yeah, because he dropped everybody off. And then when we pulled up to our stop, and also now it started to rain. So it was like pouring rain, and he drops us off at this narrow sort of road. And he couldn't go down the road because it was too narrow. But he basically said, okay, here you go. So we got left outside in like the middle of the night, really. And in the middle of this random alley. And he's like, no, no, just go straight. And like, again, it's middle of the night. So everybody is gone, but we managed to get to our place no problem. But that was just sort of kind of weird, just when you get there and you're like, where am I? And then do you remember our host, our Airbnb host? This guy was like decked out like all kinds.
Yeah, he had that funky getup, also with the little plunging neckline shirt, slick back hair, and he had the those those skinny pants with they looked kind of like shortened skinny pants. It was really weird. He had a interesting getup, that's for sure. Nice guy though.
And yeah, he was like an older guy too, and he just looked like he came from like a party just to let us in. He was so like chill about everything. It was so weird.
Yeah, yeah.
So what kind of feeling did you get in Palermo? Because I know for me it was very like very cool right off the bat, but how did it feel like for you?
It was very Italian, but it had a bit of a bit of a difference compared to other places like Rome and Naples, right? Um, it's hard to explain. I think it's got its own feel. Yeah, so it had its own vibe. I think it was pretty cool.
I liked it a lot because it was, like you said, it's very different than like other places, right? So in Rome, you know you're in Rome. Like Venice is very iconic. Like even Naples, Palermo is very different than that. So Palermo has a mix of all these different cultures, and you can actually feel it. You feel that blend of different cultures. So the Phoenicians, they had the Arabs, the Normans, the Spanish, the Greeks, the Romans. It's a very interesting blend because it's very different, right? Like it's you don't see that kind of mix in other parts of Italy. I would say you do have some of influences, obviously, but all of it blended together is very uniquely Palermo.
Yeah, I'd have to agree with that. A lot of the architecture varied, so it was kind of interesting to look at. You'd see the standard, ancient architecture you would see, say, in Rome, but then, you have some Gothic architectures, right? And, it's pretty cool.
And I think it's important to also mention that, back in the day, the position where Palermo is was a very strategic location. So you can kind of see why all these cultures wanted to dominate and have it under the control because it was very profitable, right? So it sort of got the best of it because people didn't just come and didn't just come and like destroy it. They came and they added their own flavors to it, which is I think why we see all this different architecture. We don't see, them coming in and destroying a building, building their own. They sort of blend all that together. And it's very unique because you don't really have that in a lot of places. And one of my favorite places that actually has that is the cathedral. So the Palermo Cathedral, I was obsessed with it.
Yeah, the cathedral was really nice. I think the architecture of it was quite interesting because of the fact that like I said, it wasn't the standard architecture you would notice. And once I guess you visited so many of the large Italian cities, especially Rome, you kind of get used to the type of architecture to expect. But then, you go to Sicily and you see this cathedral, and it looks a lot different from other buildings, right? So you've got the influences from the various architectural styles, right? Arab, Gothic, etc. Right? So it's actually pretty interesting to see.
Yeah, the church was very it wasn't your typical like Baroque church that you see all over Italy. It was actually, I think they started building in the 12th century. So you have the Norman style. And I love that intricate, the carvings on the outside. I think those are more of an Arabic influence. And do you remember we went on top of the cathedral has like a walkway where you can just walk on like along the rooftop. That was quite cool.
Yeah, I enjoyed that experience. It was something I wasn't expecting.
Yeah, and I can't even remember what the church looks like inside. I mean, we saw it. I'm not a huge church person, so for me, the outside of it was a bit more interesting. And the view from the church was also incredible. So if you're ever in Palermo, that cathedral is like you can't miss it. It's right there, but it's really worth exploring. And especially if you can go on top of the roof of the cathedral, the views are really incredible. I do recommend it. Another interesting church was that Church of San Cataldo. This was the one that had, it was sort of like a square building with like arched windows, but it also had these red domes, which was quite unusual. And I've never seen a church like this before in Italy in other parts. So I remember going in and we don't really see we didn't really see too much left over, but they had these really nice ceilings, which kind of reminded me of what I've seen when I was in Greece in the Byzantine churches. It was very sort of similar, kind of like a domed, um, it was more archy. It's kind of hard to describe, but it was a very different church than what you see in a Catholic, Baroque church, right?
Yeah, that goes back to what I was saying before, right? It was something you don't see in other places in Italy, and yeah, those domes were really interesting. You can actually see it's a total giveaway of the Arab influence that you would see in throughout Italy. Yeah, so those domes you can see they're actually very um, very Norman in architecture. The Arab influence is really obvious, and it's once you see it, you notice that well, yeah, this is not something you'll see elsewhere in Italy, or not very often, but you'll see quite a bit of in Sicily.
Yeah, and there's another church also with those domes. This one has, I think, five of them, and this one is called San Giovanni degli Eremiti. I don't know if I'm saying it right. So this one also is from like that 12th century. And this one is the one when we're able to go up to the tower. Do you remember there was like a small tower that you could climb up and see the views from there? And again, when we went, I think we were the only ones, so it wasn't very busy, but the views were incredible.
Yeah, the views were awesome. That was quite an experience because you can see the rooftops of all the other structures in the area, and then you also see, kind of a bit of the mountain view in the distance, right? So it was a good opportunity to get some pictures done while we were there. I think I remember we did quite a few.
Yeah, I think because with any other city, you have a lot of different churches, but I think Palermo in particular has a lot of different styles of churches, right? There was another one, the Duomo di Monreale, which is also sort of very different. Again, it's more of like the Byzantine architecture, which is more something you would see maybe in Greece. But again, you don't really see in a lot of other places in Italy. So that was very cool too. It has a lot of different churches with different styles and I guess different maybe religions, which again was very different. I didn't anticipate seeing that in Italy.
And also I noticed on that specific Duomo or cathedral, the entrance way is quite different from the rest of the structure, which is really cool. So you'll see the big arches that kind of adorn the entrance way in the front of the church, and it's nice to see that. It's like you don't see that too often.
Another great building that I really love taking pictures of was the Norman Palace. And again, it's a very Norman, Arab, and Byzantine style building with these interesting windows and these little adorations on the top, which I think are from the Islamic architecture style more so than anything else. And it's really pretty. I think it wasn't open when we went, but whenever we go back, I think we should go and see it again. You can't miss it because it's like a very distinct building that is in Palermo. It's actually it's near the cathedral.
Yeah, this palace is a little bit actually quite different from the other ones, right? You'll see it once you walk up to it because it's almost as if it's built out of sand. Like it's got that sandy coloring to it. So it's actually really cool to see that sort of structure with that finishing to it.
Yeah, because I think in like Rome, for example, you see a lot of the churches are more like brick, right? Not sorry, they're more of like a marble facade. But this one, yeah, you're right. It's like some kind of stone, maybe like almost clay looking. It's very different than the other ones. But another thing that's really creepy, which if you're into that, there's the catacombs. The catacombs are always very interesting to explore because they're actually quite common in Italy. I went to the ones in Rome as well. And it's very strange that they had so many of them. Again, if you're not sure what a catacomb is, those are sort of underground cemeteries where people used to be buried and this one has mummified remnants of some of the people who used to live here, which again, it's a little creepy, but it's a very unique experience. So if you're really into that, I would say that's a great tour to take and explore while you're in Palermo.
Yeah, that was a bit of a highlight for me because you know how I like creepy stuff and horrific horrific things and movies and stuff. So I thought the catacombs were really cool. being able to see, because you actually see a lot of the skeletons still dressed from those times on display. So yeah, it's one of those cool experiences that you would have going through that tour, right? So it may not be for everyone, but if if you're into the macabre, that's one of the things I would recommend.
You can see how they're dressed. Yeah, that's disturbing. So again, like when it comes to museums, Palermo has lots of them, and I think it's a great place to explore not just the cathedrals and the churches, the catacombs, but also there's so many great museums. We also went to the botanical garden, which was quite large, and I was actually surprised that it was there because it kind of had like a building that was very Egyptian in inspiration to me, and I didn't expect to see that in Palermo.
Yeah, the botanical gardens actually was also pretty interesting. You got to see a lot of different, I guess, local fauna, and you know, it, you'll also see some of the research that they carried out back then, right? So I think back in the 18th century, there was a big thing in the area where they had the actual department of botany in at the University of Palermo. So um, there's a lot of research that was carried out, and I think I think it contributed a lot to I guess to that specific space, right? So that was kind of cool to be able to walk through that. And I remember it was pretty hot at the time, so I think we took a little bit of a bath walking around in those gardens.
Yeah, and do you remember they had these really massive palm trees, which was again, you don't really expect it in the middle of the city. And they were, they offered a bit of shade, but when it's hot, it's hot. But it's still a great place to explore. I think it's just so unusual. You don't expect to see it in like a big city like Palermo.
Yeah, I think also kind of walking around the city, I noticed that there was some areas or some structures that still needed some work, which is kind of sad to see, right? But I noticed that they are investing in restructuring a lot of these, and and it's good to see that. But yeah, it was kind of disappointing seeing some of these structures being unkept, considering how beautiful they are. But yeah, I think a lot of the piazzas were, the usual piazzas you would see in most of the larger cities, very vibrant and full of people, right? Walking around, having their coffees, eating. So I don't know. What did you think when when you were walking around?
I loved it. Like I love just walking around. And again, I like architecture. So for me, walking around, it was just sort of like a kid in a candy store because you have so many beautiful buildings and a lot of them are, well, at the time they were a bit unkept. They were not in the best shape. But you did see a lot of the places that were restored. So you do have like really old buildings. You see the architecture from centuries gone by, and the piazzas. There's so many, and they're very decorated, and the fountains. And one of my favorite piazzas with the fountain was, the one I think it's called Piazza Pretoria, which has got this massive fountain with all these different statues all around it. So again, it's like a big circular fountain, and it's got Neptune statue and these other, I guess, mythical, characters surrounding it. And it was just so beautiful. It was just sitting there, and the buildings around it, some of them were, better shaped than others, but it was just a gorgeous spot. And I think we went, one of the buildings that was around the piazza was like a town hall or something. Remember, we went inside and they were having like a meeting, and they were like, "Oh, come on in," and we're like, "Okay." So we actually did end up taking a picture from like inside the building, which the building was also beautiful.
Yeah, Piazza Pretoria was actually really nice. I thought it was almost like very right. It reminded me kind of the Trevi Fountain. Very, obviously a much smaller version, but um, the statues that adorned it and kind of the it almost looked like steps on the sides, right? If you looked. If you were standing in front of it, so but yeah, that was a really cool site for us to visit.
There was another part of the city which is called the like four quarters, corners, and it's called Quattro Canti. That one kind of reminded me of a place in Naples. So you have almost like an intersection, and you have buildings on each corner, and each building kind of has these statues. So they're all kind of facing the inside of the crosswalk, I guess the cross section. And it's very similar to the one that's in Naples. It's a very unique and very beautiful ornamentation, especially on the buildings. So it was just kind of cool to see that type of architecture, which again, this one in particular, you see in Naples, but I haven't really seen it in other places too much. So again, I think Palermo is a really great place if you love architecture, if you love culture. I would say probably the best thing to do is just to walk around and take it all in because it has so much to offer that you can just enjoy for free. You don't have to pay to get anywhere. You can just walk around and enjoy the beauty around you. There are also some interesting museums, which I will list in the show notes. But another experience I think you cannot miss when you are in Palermo is the food. Where we stayed, there was like the oldest arancini place around from us. Do you remember that?
Yeah, I do. I think we kind of came across it by accident, but when we were visiting one of the nearby churches that where we're staying, there is a small square, a piazza that there's a small restaurant nearby, and actually another, right across the way there was actually an arancini shop basically. So I believe it was the oldest arancini shop in Palermo. So I think this is probably one of the first places that sold the delicacy. And if you're not familiar with arancini, they're deep fried rice balls. So if everybody, if you haven't been to Sicily, I'm sure you've come across it at most Italian bakeries that you visited. It's essentially a deep fried rice ball, and you can get it with different types of fillings. Like, the most common obviously is the meat sauce. So it has peas, ground beef, and tomato sauce in it. But there is also the option of having just plain cheese one with sauce, or kind of like a bechamel version of it, where it's like a white sauce and some cheese in it, right? But there's variations. You can have it with pistachio, mozzarella, stuff like that. So it's actually something you have to really experience when you're in Sicily, because they're known. That's where it originated from. And a lot of people, you will see them eating an arancini while they're walking around in the daytime there.
It's like a popular snack, isn't it? Like a just sort of like a street food slash like filler for before dinner, no?
Yeah, exactly. It's one of those snacks you have in between meals, for a quick bite, and it's super inexpensive. Like I think it was like €2 for the huge arancini ball. And it's really satisfying, right? So it'll hold you over until dinner time, that's for sure.
So another dish that I think we've talked about before when we were talking about our Sicilian road trip, that was the pasta with sardines. That's the one you liked a lot, right?
Yes, I love the pasta con sarde. So basically, it's uh, a pasta dish, with fresh sardines, and then they add in fennel, topped with breadcrumbs, mixed in with pine nuts and these tiny little raisins. Like they're almost like a really juicy raisin that they use in it. It's not like a dried up raisin. Um, but yeah, and it's super tasty. If you like sardines or seafood in general, I'd recommend getting that as a dish during dinner.
There's a pasta dish that I didn't like, but you liked, and I don't remember the name of it. So basically, it's almost like pasta that you then refry. Do you know what I'm talking about? I don't like that one. You like it.
Yeah, that's a common one. You'll find it in actually a lot of the hot tables or tavola calde. So you'll see where they actually have little trays you can pick up, and it's basically, yeah, like most times it's like ground beef mixed in with it, but sometimes you'll get it just plain, and it's almost like a day old pasta or something like that they bake or refry, And yeah, it's awesome. I love that stuff. You know, it's one of my favorite dishes too.
Yeah, I wasn't a fan of it, but whatever. There's also their own version of pizza, which again, we live in Campania, so I'm spoiled. I think the pizza here is the best. The Sicilian version of pizza, it's more like a flatbread, isn't like a focaccia style bread with like tomato sauce on it.
Yeah, it's a thicker, more doughy type of pizza, right? It's almost like a focaccia, then it's topped with the ingredients, but it's also really good. I like it when I was there.
I think I probably would say one of my favorite is the anything alla norma, which is again, norma is with eggplant. So I've had pizza alla norma before, but pasta alla norma is also very popular and is, I guess, I would say it's probably one of my favorite dishes that we have named so far. Do you have any other ones that you think are really good?
Yeah, I think there's actually one other one that's really good, and I know you don't like it that much. The caponata, which is basically eggplant with some mixed in vegetables, right? It's fried eggplant. They chop it up. You know, it's almost like a sweet and sour dish, and it's mixed in with celery, olives, capers. It's like a tomato base, and it's sweetened somewhat, right? It's got some, I believe, some vinegar in it, and the raisins and sugar are added to it also, right? So it's kind of a sweet and sour dish that I really enjoy, and you can just have it with some bread on its own as it's very filling. But most Sicilians will have it as a side dish during their lunch, and it's yeah, super tasty.
I don't mind it too much, but again, it's not my favorite. I did like I like the bread and chickpea fritters. What was the name of it? Pane e panelle?
Yeah, it's panelle, I believe it's called.
Yeah, so it's like again, it's a street food. In Sicily you can have it, and it's a combination of like sesame seed semolina. It's like bread rolled with chickpea fritters, and they're like they are seasoned with herbs and then deep fried. So it's kind of more like a doughy type thing. And again, it's street food, so you can grab it in between meals or as a side or just kind of eat, and it's quite nice.
Yeah, I thought that was pretty nice too. Like it's a good snack. And I like chickpeas, so you don't have to sell it to me.
And I guess, it's Italy, so and it's Sicily, so we shouldn't forget about the seafood, right? There is the cup of fried seafood, which is also quite good. And do you remember that restaurant we went to? It was like a outdoor restaurant. We sat like the tables were on the street and they had these carts or like these, I don't know what you call them, sort of like where they had the fish, like you just pick which fish you want and they grill it for you like right there on the street.
Yeah, I remember that, and I think that was our best meal there, and it was super cheap. Um, I think we ended up picking whatever fish we wanted, and then at the time I don't remember exactly which one we had, but yeah, that was fantastic, and super affordable. Like I don't think we've had fresher seafood than that.
I don't think that concept would really fly in Canada because you can't really cook on the street and then sell it to you. But here in Sicily, that was great, and that was a lot of food too, right? We got so much like food, and it was fresh, like you said, and it was just amazing. And it was just like you sit on the street, your table and your chairs are on the street, and they bring it at a certain time, and yeah, it was great. I loved it.
That was an awesome meal. And I think it was all basically the whole street was those type of restaurants, right? And they had barbecues out where they would grill your seafood. Most of the dishes were grilled, and you did have the fried appetizers too. Uh, but yeah, that was a fantastic meal.
They also had some pretty cool coffee shops, like kind of hipster vibe to them. And of course, we had some desserts, so we can't forget the cannoli. Cannoli was, it's not my favorite dessert. I know you like the cannoli. They're pretty good in Sicily. And then there's the other one, the cassata siciliana. Like I don't like that one, but you do, right?
Uh, yeah, so if you're, if you're not familiar with cassata, it's basically ricotta. It's a ricotta cake with candied fruits, and sometimes they put in chocolate chips in there, which I'm not a big fan of. But the uh, the ricotta that they use is actually originates from goat milk instead of the usual cow milk, right? So you get that creamier, stronger, more pungent flavor from it. And it's yeah, it's totally unique, right? And they also use the same type of ricotta in the cannoli, which is amazing down in Sicily. So if you get a chance, you have to try both of them.
I think one of my favorite desserts in Sicily and in Palermo was the granita. So I talked about it before. It's similar to, it's not like gelato, but it's like shaved ice with flavor. I usually like the strawberry, and you can get it with like some kind of like almost not whipped cream, but some kind of like a cream style on top. I like that one. And people in Sicily, even all over Italy, they eat it with like a sweet brioche, which is not my thing. I just like to have my granita strawberry granita with the cream on top, and it's quite nice and it's very refreshing. And that's a must when you are in Sicily as well.
Yeah, I couldn't get used to the the whole brioche with the granita. I always picture them separate, but yeah, it's a big thing where they eat their granita with a brioche bread. It's an interesting thing to see. If you ever see people order it, um, I can't eat it that way. It has to be separate, so I'm good with eating the granita on its own.
Yeah. I think Palermo is such a great place, not just for like the architecture and the culture, but it's also great for food, right? They have these markets. Remember, we went to see the market and they have a few of them. There's, I think, two or three that are like quite large, which they have like a fish market. And if you ever watch any movies that are set like in Palermo or they have some sort of element in Palermo, you usually see like a scene at like a seafood market where they sell fish or there's some kind of fish theme going on. And that's because it's there. It's such a popular thing that, there's vendors displaying all kinds of fish that they caught, and you get anything there from like, the little fried fishes. You can get like the arancini, you can get cannoli. There's other things other than fish that you can get there, but they are really quite interesting to see. So, like again, if you are there, I would totally say do like a walk around and explore the markets because they're incredible.
So I guess, one of the things you'd want to do, because there's a lot of info to take in, but you know, I would recommend a food tour, especially down in Sicily, because there's so many things to try, right? And you definitely want someone that would take you to, uh, one of the better spots. Even though I personally didn't have any issues with the places we visited or attended when we ate and tried the local, I guess, the local delicacies. But yeah, I think that's one of the things I would probably recommend when you're in Palermo.
Yeah, because it's a good way to experience the food if you're not familiar with it or you don't know where to have it or how to find it. You have somebody take you around and they will give you samples so you can actually taste. You can get an idea of what to look for when you're going on your own and what to buy. And I think they're just fun. Like I think it's a great way to discover the city and not just for food, but I think, all with other tours, it's a great way to get to know the location without actually having to do everything yourself. So when you think of Palermo, do you have any favorite like moments or memories that come to mind?
I think one of the more one of the bigger highlights, obviously outside of the food, which is I'm always excited about. I think the place we were staying at, the Airbnb, was a great spot. It was central. It was had a great view on the patio that was upstairs, and it was close to that arancini place, which was a bonus.
Yeah, I think that was probably one of the best Airbnbs we ever stayed at because it was in like an old building and we were where we were staying and the rooftop patio, they were on a different level, but it was part of the Airbnb. So I remember sitting there. We sat there almost every night that we were there. And one of my favorite memories is just sitting there. It was at night and we were just, having some drinks. And all you could hear is just, the noises of like plates, of, cutlery, of people talking and music playing. And I think that was one of my favorite experiences. That's something that always, like when I think of Palermo, that's what comes to my mind is that rooftop with, all those sounds of like vibrancy and people and flavors and sounds. That's one of my favorite memories. And I think for me, that's what Palermo is that vibe, that constant buzz of life, of like enjoyment. And I think that's what sticks with me whenever I think of Palermo.
Yeah, it definitely has its own vibe, its own flavor there because it's quite different in comparison to other parts of Italy. And it's definitely a place that needs to be experienced.
So now let's talk about when's the best time to visit, because I'm sure everybody's always thinking of, when you can go. And we went, it was summertime, wasn't it, when we went? I think it was still pretty hot.
Yeah, it was extremely hot. So even even for myself, and I enjoy the heat. So I'm not much of a complaints from my end, but for most people it was definitely hot. So probably not the best thing to go is the in the middle of summer.
When we went for our road trip, we were there in June. But I would argue, I keep saying this because I think it's something that most people don't think of. Sicily can be a great place to go in like January, February, March. March, April, you have the stuff start to bloom, so you have pretty flowers. But it's also a great place. It's a big city, so the restaurants stay open. People go to eat, people hang out, the museums are open, the fish markets go on. So why would you not explore it at that time? I don't think as many people would be going to, let's say, Sicily and Palermo, off season, especially like if you talk about like January, February, March. So I think that's a great way to kind of go and experience the city without like the crowds. And to be fair, when we went, it was busy, but I think a lot of the tourists that were there were sort of more European tourists. There were not too many like North Americans there.
Yeah, I would agree on that. There weren't very many North Americans to be seen, but yeah, it was mostly Europeans.
And I would say if you're starting your adventure in Sicily, you probably will be flying into Palermo, or if you're flying into Catania and getting other ways. So again, you could drive into Palermo. We flew into Palermo, but we left from Catania. So we took the train from Palermo to Catania. Again, I think maybe things have improved since we were there in the middle of the night. So I would say if you're coming, if you're flying in late, there might be some interesting adventures on how to get to the city because the airport is not like really close to it. But it shouldn't be that difficult to get to the city from the airport. The train station is also there, and I think you can also take ferries from mainland Italy. So if you don't mind being on the water for a while, that's also a great way to get to Palermo.
Yeah, I would personally rent a car because I enjoy driving through Italy. It's a beautiful country, and it's pretty impressive to see some of the sites, and it's a good way to see other places, right? Like you're driving through other towns and cities, and you can actually see you know what they're like. Even though it'll be brief, I think it's a good way to plan your future trips.
Yeah, I would agree with that because again, you want to be able to see more than just Palermo, right? If you're flying all the way there, I think you might as well go see a bit other parts of Sicily. So there's beautiful beaches on that coast. You can, drive to places like Cefalù, which we've talked about. So there's lots of things to see in Sicily other than Palermo. And I think, Palermo also makes for a good base if you're wanting to go and see those day trips and you want to see the other parts of Sicily. So yeah, I agree. Rent a car if you have that option and enjoy like the other sites that are surrounded or even on the island. So anyway, I think Palermo is a great city if you love food, right? If you love history, culture, architecture. It really has something for everyone. I don't really see why someone wouldn't like Palermo. What do you think?
Yeah, I don't see anyone not enjoying themselves when they're in Palermo. It is the capital of Sicily, so I can't really find any faults.
And it felt safe when we were there, no? Like it was even at night, we walked around and, I didn't feel unsafe. I didn't feel like it was, a dangerous place. I don't think you should be worried about that aspect of it going there. Because again, I felt it was a very safe city and had lots of people around. There's lots of things happening. So it's not like you're going to be in the middle of the night by yourself with nothing there. Of course, be vigilant in touristy places because, pickpocketing is very common everywhere. And just be aware of your surroundings and you'll be fine.
I fully agree. The city itself, you might even some of the back alleys that we walked through. I don't think we felt unsafe at the time. And it was pretty late at night, so I think it's totally tourist safe.
Yeah, I agree. So if you are interested in going to Palermo, we definitely recommend it. And if you want to know more about taking a road trip and you haven't heard to our episode about the road trip in Sicily, I suggest you go and you listen to that because we talked about the other places in on the island that we think are really worth exploring. So again, if you're thinking of, planning a trip, whether it's summer or another time, make sure you check those out. And we hope you enjoy Palermo.
See you next time.
And this brings us to the end of this episode. Thank you so much for listening. We hope you enjoyed it. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and review on whatever you're listening right now. We'll be back next week, so stay tuned.